This episode of Bullet Heaven HD was made possible by Pixel Nest Studios. The personal computer sure has become a solid place for a player to get their shooting fix, especially on Steam. Whether it's the sweet procedural goodness of Luftrausers, the insane antics of the Mommy's Best Action Pack, or the one-on-one pong-em-up clashes in Redshift Blueshift, indies are definitely leading the charge for shmups on Steam in some pretty great ways.
There are a lot of choice indie games that shmup fans can play, but none are quite like Steredenn. As a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up that incorporates roguelike elements to its fairly traditional style of play, it does so in some pretty interesting ways. Genre fusion is always something we love taking a look at, so let's see what makes Steredenn tick.
Steredenn starts off more or less like any other shooting game. 8-way and analog control gets players moving about the screen at a solid rate, with analog control allowing for fine-tuned movement speeds on the fly. Your craft's shot button is mapped to the A button if you're using an Xbox 360-based controller. The Steam controller also works very well, especially with analog control. Finally, the tiny green canopy on your ship is your hitbox, allowing for some tight bullet dodging.
Here's where Steredenn's first twist comes in. Carrier ships can be destroyed and will deploy a weapon which is randomly generated. This new weapon is picked up with the Y button. Anything in the game could drop, which players then store in the secondary weapon slot in the top left-hand corner of the screen. When this slot is filled, players can switch between their stocked weapons by pressing the Y button.
From there, additional collected power-ups will replace the one that is currently selected. Being that any weapon could be dropped, knowing which one works for your playstyle could take a while, especially with new, never-experienced weapons appearing completely at random. With such a wide, crazy variety of weaponry at your disposal, with each one's power being different from the last, knowing which works best for you will get you further in the game.
However, each one is color-coded to give players an idea of what's to come. Yellow is a bullet-style weapon that features rapid shots and clusters of bullets. Red is a heavy weapon, along the lines of missiles, rockets, and flamethrowers. Purple will deploy a small bot that tracks and fires at enemies independently until destroyed. Blue is for laser and energy weapons. Finally, gray corresponds to melee weapons like saws, swords, and jaws.
The next big twist is in Steredenn's game progression. While there are 7 stages to any one playthrough, there are actually seemingly infinite stages to play through, since each stage is randomized every time you play. Everything from the enemy patterns, enemy types, and backdrops are totally different every single time you play. As the game progresses, new enemy types show up the further the player goes, making for a more and more randomized play session. This not only makes Steredenn a game that you can play for a very long time, but also one that is extremely difficult in true roguelike fashion.
The first 3 stages also have variable bosses as well. The earlier the stage, the more variants there are. Stage 1 has 4 different bosses, Stage 2 has 3, Stage 3 has 2, and finally, starting with Stage 4, each boss only has 1 version. The randomized bosses in stages 1 through 3 also make for quite a bit of replay, just to get used to each one's vastly different attack patterns. Defeating each boss also yields ship enhancement, which will strengthen various weapon types, add health points, boost score, and more. You can check the status of your ship's enhancements by pausing the game at any time.
All solid, but man, is this game ever hard. Even with the life bar, not knowing exactly what's coming, paired with hyper-fast shots and some really sneaky patterns, makes for an experience that's a tough nut to crack at any skill level. At the very least, all of the bullets and obstacles in Steredenn are clear and easy to see. You'll try many times to get through, guaranteed, which makes for a lot of replay value, but also a lot of frustration as well, especially when multiple loops come into play.
But if that's just not enough for you, there are also daily run and arena modes. Arena pits players against a timed boss fight versus any of the bosses cleared or seen frequently. Great for practice. Daily run, on the other hand, gives players a single randomly selected chance at greatness on a worldwide score attack.
The scoring in Steredenn almost doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Since the game is more or less randomly generated as you go, score can also fluctuate greatly as well. Still, there are a couple ways to boost up your score, especially for daily run.
Firstly, destroying complete enemy waves or fulfilling specific conditions will engage a multiplier in the top right hand of the screen. The higher the multiplier, the more your kills will be worth. However, if your ship sustains damage, the multiplier will fall.
Power-ups also exist after killing bosses that can add additional percentile bonuses to the score, reducing the rate at which the multiplier falls, and giving players additional chances to complete enemy waves. Once again, these drops are totally random, and only one can be chosen at a time.
That's more or less all there is to it. Surviving the enemy onslaught can be hard, but when playing for survival isn't enough, the Steam leaderboards give high score chasers that extra layer of replayability that only a game with infinite replay can satisfy.
One area in which Steredenn shines is in its presentation. There's an awful huge lot of work that went into the visual and audio in this game, and it shows.
Visually, the one single thing that will jump out and grab you is the backgrounds. Always impressive and ever-changing, there are definitely many more to see than the 7 stages you'll fly through. Blazing suns, cold nebulae, space station clusters, they're all pretty freaking sweet.
Meanwhile, all of the ships and emplacements represented here are well designed and animated, even taking the light from their shots into consideration at times. The multiple forms for the player's ship, depending on the weapon chosen, is a cool touch. Our only real complaint is that the visuals on the whole aren't high-res enough to really bring out the details.
The visuals are still pretty good though, and the sound follows suit, with great representations of shields, bullets, lasers, and explosions the whole way through the game. These effects work very well for everything that they represent and never come off as annoying.
But where the effects are great, the music really shines in Steredenn. Guitar-heavy tracks are perfectly suited for the tense moments you'll contend with throughout the whole game. The soundtrack also dynamically slows and speeds up in pause menus and power-up phases too, making for an immersive oral experience. Truly great stuff.
To round it all off, the UI in Steredenn is simple and effective in its presentation as well. It's easy to understand and navigate, so anyone can get through the menus to tweak and play the game with ease. The addition of Steam leaderboards, achievements, and even trading cards complete the Steam package.
So just how does Steredenn all stack up? Let's take a look. Even with an analog controller, Steredenn handles extremely well.
Digital control works well too, but having the on-the-fly variable speed of analog works best here.
Steredenn is always hard. There's not much more to say about that.
The challenge can only really be eased by practice and finding a weapon combo that works best for you, by luck.
There's no end to Steredenn's endless stage generation.
These random stages make for infinite replay.
There are some truly great visuals and backdrops here, but they suffer from a too low resolution that keep them from really standing out.
The backdrops are pretty amazing though.
An awesome OST makes Steredenn feel particularly tense.
The sound effects are also appropriate and non-offensive.
Infinitely changing stage sets with randomized bosses and powers make for a game that could be played forever. The scoring isn't especially consistent though.
It's not the only roguelike shmup on the block, but it could definitely be the best with its thoughtful, though tough, mechanics.
Anyone looking for a super hard shmup with the right amounts of random generation should really look no further than Steredenn. It's definitely a game that has us hooked. Steredenn gets a 4.5 out of 5. You can get a copy of Steredenn on Steam today for about $13 US.
does so in some pretty interesting ways. Genre fusion is always something we love taking a look at. Really? My God.